He's not rocking what you're saying.
No, he's not.
Did the Bills win?
Yes. Sure.
I should, yeah. I'm trying to train them.
They may become America's team.
Start figuring out what if you want to go.
Oh, Brett. Where's my notebook?
Hey, how you doing? I'm doing fine. See what this fellow's up to. Oh gosh, I gotta remember my name.
Yes. Yeah.
This is Rita, she's 3. Trained as
Projects.
Oh, yeah, okay, so we need to get more.
interested
You signed this.
I have, I was number 1, ain't you?
Yeah, well, she's still pretty, she's still growing.
Like a lot.
My first impression, I think things is difficult.
She liked how you, yeah.
Hydroponics seem to be very, work very well.
Nice.
Well, no, we're all
As a construction guy, it seems sensible. Maybe they're out cooking. Yes. Good.
My clock's almost done. We reset it like weekly.
WEA?
Yeah. It's got a mind of its own. It tends to be fast with
I
time.
think, or you have
So
some
about-
that keeps changing. Or you have somebody swinging, that's somebody that keeps changing. 10 years
Just-
from now,
just
we can
always-
add another section or something.
It's always off, but it's pretty close now.
I agree with that. Oh, I didn't know that.
Good. And not so good, but good. Just dealing with our own parents and stuff, it's not so good. The weather was good. They make a lot of wine out there. I just found that out.
Do you think this is helping him?
Wasn't supposed to. We could get one over to Sonoma, but Napa was good. It was good. Because last year was very, it was a mess.
I know some people that everything is very inspired.
It's tremendous. I mean, it's just so dry. So now, what's really big challenges is they do the rolling, not rolling, but just blackouts to keep the lights and they get crazy fires. But these folks aren't used to dealing with 4 or 5 days without power.
Solar, but they have meter service like we have a lot of people. They shut those down. So that, even if you have the solar power, you can't in your own building, you get
It's drawn back to the system.
right, you should plug back in the system. Those will shut down.
Boy, John, you're popular.
No, it's you. It's all about you, baby.
Select board doesn't.
What time is it?
Select board doesn't look as good. That one's off always a little bit, so.
I'm gonna go with the computer. All right, hello, everybody. Welcome to the planning board. Tonight was noticed and scheduled as a working meeting. What that means is, and why it was scheduled as a working meeting, is because we have a really tight deadline. And basically, we have to get this article done tonight. So, but we have all of you, which is a rare opportunity. So I will consult the board. We need to get this done. How shall we approach this? I don't want to schedule another meeting, another extra meeting after.
I didn't know if people had stuff to say, or they're just interested in what we're doing, you know, because the people are here to give us input as we're working on it, that might be useful.
Okay.
But, you know, I think that we need time, because there's a lot of stuff that I want to see too.
Yeah.
So maybe we could 45 minutes or something, and then bring stuff on it, is that working?
Yeah, no, I actually think what I suggest is you explain, I mean, for the audience that's here, a few have been to many of our meetings,
Right.
but most haven't.
Right.
And so I think some background, some loading of where we are, where we're going, and then we work, because I think we've got a lot of work to get done.
Okay.
And then, you know, if there's some time at the end for feedback, but that's how I think we should go about it.
All right.
We should look about, like, when can they talk and.
Well, you said let's go 45 minutes. Let's see where we are in 45.
No, but because if they want to do it, input, they shouldn't be going, oh, my gosh, up here at 10 and then walk away.
Our task is really to progress what we've got in front of us.
All right, well, let's go to 40, go for 45 minutes, and if we feel like we need some input, we'll do that. So the background is, what we are working on is a senior housing zoning amendment where it would be located for 62 and over. And not the HOPA, the HOPA, which is an Older Persons Act, which is also legal. But the problem, at least from my perspective with that, is it's a 55, you need one 55-year-old in a unit. 80% of the units have to have a 55-year-old or, 55-year-old or older. You could, and there's no limit on, at least my understanding, and people correct me if I'm wrong, there's no limit on the number of people you can have in that unit, and you can have any range of age. Conceivably, you could have a whole HOPA development where you don't have a single person over 55, or you don't have anybody over 62. I don't think it's realistic for what we want, which is to address 62 and older. And when we're talking about 62 and older, for what we're doing in town, the particular approach we're taking here is not assisted living, though. If people wanted to do assisted living, they could. This is for people who are in good enough health that they can live independently, but in a senior housing development. The other aspects of it are that we would have a maximum of 10 units per development. I can go through I have so many notes, you have to bear with me. I can go through the feasibility. We have about 10 properties listed as very likely to likely that could be developed to a maximum of 10 within the Lyme Common District. That's the maximum. We have other properties that don't reach the maximum. But you could maybe have, not maybe, you could have less than 10. There are, oh, and we have a second, another tier of 9, actually, it's turned out, I thought it was 10, it's 9, that are, we weren't sure, but there, I think there's at least a handful in there that might be 10. The other thing to keep in mind is when we did the build-out, when David did a tremendous amount of work on that, we used 350 gallons per day loading, is that right? What David subsequently discovered is that for senior housing, that actually is 125, which means our calculations way underestimated the qualifying feasibility of properties. I'm
Based on septic.
Yeah, so I'm pretty confident we have a pretty decent amount of viable things, viable properties. The 5 lower cost of the maximal properties average out to about 400,000. That's on the lower side of the 10. So I think there's a lot of potential. Anybody else have anything to add?
200 square feet.
Yeah, oh, the large, and people correct me when I inevitably say something in error. But the largest the unit can be is 1,200 square feet. The largest, I think it's the gross building footprint is 12,000. But it's gonna be done through site plan review. So it will be site specific, and it will be largely controlled by this, not completely, but by septic, the capability of the property. What else?
Let's have some more chairs up front here, because we don't need these 3. So
Maybe,
please.
I don't know how many people here even have kind of the real big picture, but just sort of why we started to do this in the first place might be worth spending a minute to talk about, because if somebody wanted to do senior housing today, somewhere in town, I presume they could do something.
They could do something.
So the question would be, if I had 20 acres and I wanted to put in X units, what would I do? That's a question, and that I would actually sort of maybe spend a minute to talk about, that there is the opportunity to do senior housing today. What we're trying to do here is encourage it and direct it to the village center. Not that it would preclude it outside of that, but that the process that we're trying to describe here is a way to make it potentially more likely that someone would wanna build it closer to the
Yeah, we're
to Lyme
trying,
Center.
well, and
maybe you can,
and
you guys could talk to that, 'cause
it's appropriate. I went to the aging and life, for those of you who've been here a number of times, I'm sorry you have to sit through me saying the same things over and over again, but so be it. I went to the aging in place meeting for several years, and that's where my original interest in it came from. And my takeaway from that was nobody under 62 ever came to those meetings. And there were various ideas, people wanted a lot of different things, but I would put it either a plurality or even a majority valued being in the center. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's walkability, there's all of the services that are available. if people, need rides, they can more easily get it from their neighbors. They'll be incorporated into the community instead of isolated somewhere. To me, I mean, everything is controversial, but to me, that just seems common sense. And so, yeah, we wanna concentrate senior housing in the central part. I am not averse to considering other areas. I would be willing to consider the commercial district, but it doesn't compare to the advantages of the central area, and we really haven't studied that closely enough to do that at this time. Does that seem sufficient? Because we're gonna have to get started at some point.
Yeah, so in encouraging it and coming up with a different process for senior housing, what we're trying to do is then define, well, what kinds of things would be allowed to use that process? What types of development? And that's where we're getting at questions like, how many people live there, of what age, what size can it be? So that's where all those questions come from, as to trying to define what is senior housing for the purpose of making it easier in the Lyme Common District.
And as we go through this, you'll get our approach to what we're doing. So why don't we get on with it, okay? Is that?
Sure.
Okay. So everybody get their articles out, and so I'm looking at the old article and Vicky's, oh, and there was some comment about how long it was, you know, that was 5 pages long. This is how long it is, it's not 5 pages long. The reason it looked like it's 5 pages long is because there are these other pages that have to be changed in the ordinance to accommodate the incorporation of this language, legal stuff. Okay, so let's just go through what we got. So definition for Article 2. So Vicky, I think that was really smart to add these definitions. So the definition, senior housing, an arrangement of dwelling units designed exclusively for seniors as set forth in Article 13. Is everybody okay with that?
And permitted through site plan review under section 1210.
You don't need to say that,
No?
no.
And she's just adding that's the.
Definition.
Yeah, this is a definition. Oh, I see what you're referring to. We did have that.
Yeah, the senior
And
housing
permitted,
definition.
and permitted through site plan review. Is there a reason not to include that?
I think if you wanna say it's permitted through site plan review, you should put it in the regulatory part and not the
Okay.
definition part.
Okay. I will defer to your expertise.
You already say it, you know.
Okay. And a senior is defined as a person at least 62 years of age. Okay. And then the modify the table. David, when I looked at that table, the way I read it here, it looks like Article 13 applies to all the districts. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, it's just, to see Article 13, and then the Article 13 specifically says Lyme Common. So we can change the table to, instead of say, see Article 13, to just,
Lyme just so that it's clear, you know,
Yeah,
the clearer it
absolutely.
is, the better. So just,
absolutely.
I would say just have it as in the Lyme Common.
Yep, easy enough to do.
Okay, so Article 13, senior housing, now we're done with all of the preambles, this is the actual article. So we had, Vicky, you changed it a little. Senior housing is a specific residential use I'm not sure, I may have combined these, so anyway, let me just try this. Senior housing is a specific residential use suited to the needs of older people located close to municipal and social services and facilities and designed to facilitate independent living with an emphasis on safety and accessibility. The exterior appearance and massing of a structure containing senior housing must be harmonious and consistent with the present character of the neighborhood. That's fairly standard language, I believe Rich objected to this language, but I wouldn't be comfortable doing this in the Lyme Common area unless the development was respectful of the existing appearance of the neighborhood. And how does everybody else feel about that?
I agree.
Yeah.
agree as well.
Yeah. Okay, so are we okay? Oh, I had a question about this. So, do we need to delineate, as we do sometimes elsewhere, the objectives, or is this sufficient? Or are these considered the objectives?
Those would be considered the objectives.
Okay,
I mean, are there other things that you?
not really.
That,
I mean, I think we pretty much covered what we wanna cover there.
so, just one question on that, so Lyme Center wouldn't be a,
Okay.
neighbors,
I mean, one of the problems, it'd be fine with me, but I kind of feel like, number one, we haven't done our due diligence. It's not an easy ride, and there are not a lot of services there. But I'm open to it, I don't have a, I'm not against it, it just doesn't seem like we
didn't do the septic analysis.
We didn't do septic analysis, I'm a little worried about that ride, that's a tough ride, particularly in winter. So,
Well, we also, and we talked about, if you were here, we talked about trying to get this started in an area, in an area in a limited way, and it could expand. If people really wanna do it elsewhere.
Right.
There's nothing precluding us from later on
Yeah,
saying,
and
let's add another,
thank you for-
another area later, but let's try to do it in an area where we can more visualize it and understand what the impacts
right.
would be, and they're consistent with the village center idea, this village center idea.
Thank you for
And then
bringing
we
that,
can
and
zoom in.
we should make that clear. What we're doing here is a start. I mean, we may find that, all 10 of the maximal viable buildings, this is not gonna happen. But, we get 100 senior units and, but assuming it's a more realistic, development, we'll see what happens, and if it seems like, well, we should expand this to another area, we'll do it, but we wanna be cautious, and not blow things up. Oh,
I
yeah.
still like Lyme Center, and CCL's there, and there's a gathering spot at the church as well, so it's like there's that place for people to go and to be social, and so that's just why.
Okay.
But I'm in the minority probably, but I'm just
I'm
saying,
not-
I think it's a good.
I could be convinced,
I would be concerned about septic. There's just, you have Grant Brook on one side, and then up behind the church, that area actually has a lot of very wet area.
Yeah.
And so I think it may prove difficult to, for anything of any size to be built. So it's something I definitely want to look at.
Okay.
Or how about this? We see how things go in March with this,
Mhm.
and if it's positive, we can go do the build-out analysis like we did in the common.
Mhm.
And if it looks like it's sort of worthy, if you will, has opportunity,
Yeah.
we go
Okay.
again
Yeah.
right,
and modify it to
Yep.
such, so.
right.
Just kind of follow the same process that we did to get to where we did with the common.
Yes, that sounds
I
good.
don't even know where the boundaries are.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't, I'm uncomfortable, because we really haven't done our due diligence with that. But in principle, I'm fine with it. All right, so now, that paragraph that you've probably now forgotten, because I have, that I read is sort of the coverall, the objectives, and now we're gonna go into the sub-clauses that go into the details. And if you're all, I got on my glasses, but you're all, I see most people's eyes are still open, so that's a good sign. The senior housing development must meet all the requirements for a site plan review, so there's the reference to the site plan review, right? And that, it says it must meet all the requirements for site plan review, that means it's gotta go to site plan review. Okay. Under 1210, under section 1210, which is the site plan review section, as well as the following criteria. Okay. So, a senior housing may be located in a building or on a lot with other uses permitted in the zoning district. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I have a question about it, though. If there's not some sort of a ratio or a minimum of units that are in a mixed-use building that are dedicated to senior housing, wouldn't it be possible to build one unit of senior housing and have 9 business uses, business units?
Depends on how you write it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the way it's written now.
Right.
You could have one senior housing unit and 9 business uses. And this is a senior housing development. I think we have to, we have to have some floor and to, I mean, it's great, particularly for the seniors who will be there, maybe to have a relevant inside business or two. But what about 80% of the units have to be no, they have to be senior housing units.
Yeah, we had talked about that down here.
In F, and what was in F before, there was that question about should
Right.
be 80-20
Right.
or 100%.
Well, I do think it'd be very, very nice in a senior development, if people wanted to have, somebody who did a hair or massage person. I think that'd be wonderful.
Well, I don't know what we're, if we're trying to squeak in senior units wherever we can, shouldn't we allow flexibility with
Yes.
what the mix of uses are, rather than say 80%?
So how do we guard against somebody coming in and
Well,
And-
maybe it's not a, so you're saying,
so if I come to you and I say, I'm gonna build a senior housing development and I'm gonna qualify because I built a senior housing unit and I'm gonna have 9 units of business.
I don't think that, I think what we said is you can't have more than 10 units of senior housing in one place, right?
Okay,
Right, so maybe that's not limited, how many businesses could go there. I don't understand. So
So-
why are there 10? Is it kind of trying to stay related to our maximum of 6 dwelling units in
No.
a structure?
I just
So-
wanna make sure there's not, that somebody can't come in and, look at this wording and game it.
Well, wouldn't it make more sense than to count units, to count percentages of the gross square footage or something like that, so that the majority of the, inside of that building is being used for senior housing rather than do it by units?
Okay,
Yes, 80% of the square footage. So Vicky, I think the concept really was trying to relax the zoning to allow it to happen, but then not to allow it to be overdeveloped on the commercial side.
Right, but I don't see
I'm-
how,
Well, that's why
counting
we're-
units isn't gonna do it, the building's gonna be whatever size the building is,
right,
right?
right.
So as long as it's mostly
So
senior housing.
what would you think
do we
is
care
a good
about the number?
percentage?
I don't know, I mean, what I wanna do is if somebody wants to invest and they're trying to support like a little bit of affordability there, maybe that the businesses are gonna be supporting the
The rest of it.
residential end of it.
Right, right.
And so, I would like for that to be able to happen. I don't know what the right mix is there, for that. And You know, so but I kind of, rather than counting units in, to set that
Okay, well, we're,
relationship, it seems like the amount of space makes more sense to me.
That
But we
makes
needed to
sense.
refine it somehow.
yeah,
Well, if 80% feels good,
Because
Right, let's-
to you that, you know.
It's hard to know, isn't it?
It is,
Yeah.
it's really hard to know.
Well, we talked about, you know, having it where the senior housing is on the first floor and then there might be commercial development on the second floor, which could be 50-50 based on the gross square footage area,
Right.
which, again, that doesn't bother me.
no,
But I think the 90-10, where somebody is trying to get expedited development for their business by tacking on one senior housing unit is the kind of gaming that
That's-
unfortunately happens.
yeah,
So what are they gonna be getting? I don't understand what you mean by expedited, cause I don't see that
They
they're gonna
might
get
get different
expedited.
setbacks, they might get different square,
Oh, I see,
Yeah.
because there's some flexibility about what the
Yeah.
planning board might allow or might
Right,
not allow.
we have there's
I
a
get it,
lot of
okay.
flexibility there where,
Well, why would
again,
you-
that's designed so that
so
we
it's
can make it
site-specific.
easier to put senior housing
Right.
in by saying, okay, if we're gonna get this benefit of senior housing, then
Exactly,
we will give you a little more lot coverage or
yeah,
something else than you might otherwise have.
right,
So, again, we don't want somebody to come in and game.
right. Okay,
Which happens.
so in the name of keeping this thing moving, let's just, I'm gonna just put a note here that we're gonna come up with a percentage, we're agreed we're gonna do it by percentage, or are we not?
At minimum, 50% would be my way of thinking of it, based on the two-story
Right,
idea. But
okay,
could be higher.
all right, let's just leave that for now at,
Do you want also to just sort of throw out that you could, make that part of your site plan review, that, you know, based on the character of the development, make that decision at site plan review, so you're not locked, you know, you may have one that doesn't work with a huge amount of commercial space and one that does.
well, maybe we could say that, but I think we wanna have a floor, and 50% might be a good floor.
You always change it.
And we can always change it later. So, all right, so let's at least have that as a provisional
Yeah,
thing.
my concern is, you know, as you start, you know, getting, you know, units, that different businesses come in, you have different requirements for parking, and you start having to do a site plan for every new business that comes in, because you know, the parking is
Right.
inadequate, so it's really,
So what would you recommend?
well, I do like the idea that the planning board, you know, looking at it at the time of site plan review, and maybe having a minimum that you set, say, you know, that you minimum of 50%,
That's-
just throw a
that's-
number out,
That's what I'm saying,
Of
50% floor,
and then.
but you could have more under certain circumstances.
If there, you know, if the plan works out better that way.
Right, yeah, if we're gonna get, well, I don't know, I actually can't think of a really great example of how that might be, but I think we have to set a floor. All right, so let's have that as provisional, we'll come back to it. All right, B, no more than 2 residents where one resident is at least 62 years old may occupy a senior housing dwelling unit. A third, at least 18 years of age, who is caregiver for the other 2 residents may also occupy a senior housing dwelling unit. The only, a little thing in the wording here, a third, at least 18 years of age, who is a caregiver, it says, with your change, Vicky, for the other 2 residents, I think we could say for one of the residents, because they may not be caregiver. Yeah, okay, so is that okay?
In your language, I'm going off of the one that Rich sent out, and I'm not seeing the same language that you're reading
No, I'm not
to us.
either.
Did you?
Oh, yeah, I think some of these I changed, a lot of it incorporating Vicky's stuff.
We don't
Okay.
see those.
Well, that's, I'm reading to you, reading it to you
Okay,
now.
well, it'd be nice to have it in print. but-
Sorry.
Well, if we're wordsmithing, we need to see the words.
I got it done.
They go by pretty fast.
I got it done fairly recently.
Okay.
No more than 2 residents where one resident is at least 62 years old may occupy a senior housing dwelling unit. a third at least 18 years of age who is caregiver to one of the other, caregiver for
Both,
One of the senior.
one, or you want one or both?
yeah, one or both.
The other residents may also occupy the senior housing unit. Okay. Senior housing, this is now C. Senior housing dwelling units may be no larger than 1,200 square feet. And there were questions about where the 1,200 square feet came from. One was feedback from somebody who's done a lot of building in town. And also, so I looked at, and actually Lenore, you're here, Lenore? Hey, Lenore. Lenore kindly got me thinking about, what was that called, Quail Hollow? Was it Quail Hollow? Yeah, Quail Hollow. So I looked into Quail Hollow, and you can find this on apartments.com, Quail Hollow, West Lebanon. You'll increase their hits and numbers by a lot. The one bedrooms there are 691 square feet. This is a development that's only, there are no extras. It's just apartments. Am I right about that?
There's no services
Yeah,
associated
it's
with
not
it.
assisted living.
Okay.
So the one bedrooms are 691 square feet. The two bedrooms are 1,082. So the 1,200 limit seems reasonable, both based on the feedback from the person in Lyme who's done a lot of projects and thought it was reasonable, and from what we found here. And I looked at the greens, and it's much harder to get information about them. The only thing I could find was there were two one-bedroom units available to rent or buy it, but they were each 591 square feet. So 1,200 seems to be on the reasonable side of this stuff.
So in C, did we get rid of the average size,
Yeah,
greater than, just decide, just leave
I
it?
think it's okay
Just to leave it.
because with the 1,200 and then the 12,000 gross
Mhm.
building footprint, you're gonna have to have some shared space.
Right.
And that will help have a variety of unit sizes. I mean, I think ideally, you're gonna wanna have some one bedrooms and some two bedrooms, which you can get into the.
The market will drive a lot of that,
Right.
based on what people prefer, and also based on not necessarily the goal of the developer to maximize all of them at 1,200. Because they might rather have more units at a smaller size.
Right.
Probably will, yeah.
Right, okay, and then, again, with feedback, we felt that 10 was a good number, and it works with the 1,200 per unit and then the 12,000. And right now, by conversion in the common, you can do up to 6 units. The state requirement for multifamily housing is 5 units, so it's double the state's minimum requirement. And so that's where the 10 came from. Moving to E, shared or common areas within a building with more than one senior housing dwelling unit are permitted. So first, okay, this was your language, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, I just thought it needed to be clear that they could have both shared within the building and then have things like accessory structures that didn't count against the, that 1,200.
Okay, and is this clear that this, all right, so if we say shared or common areas within a building with more than one senior housing dwelling unit are permitted. So if you have two senior housing units, you can have a shared space. Okay, anybody,
And that shared space doesn't count.
is it, how is it clear?
What was the downside to
Doesn't
the,
count it
I'm sorry, go ahead.
to the residential
Yeah.
unit square footage.
I don't, is that clear?
What was wrong with the language from the rev before that?
Which was what?
Common areas and garage space may be allowed and shall not be counted as residential unit square footage.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think
What
we
was-
need to distinguish that some of those common spaces could be within that structure, that where the dwelling units are, and then garage spaces outside.
Yeah,
To make sure that both of those situations are allowed, so you can have an accessory structure like a garage, or if they share a garden shed or something like that, that's outside. But inside, you can have common space that wouldn't take away from their independent living unit.
Okay. It just seems like the original language covered it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why it excludes it, but I guess that shared or common areas, and you could even add parenthetically or something, within
Structure.
the residential structure.
Well, it could be also outside, you know, sometimes condominiums have shared, you know, garden space, I don't know,
Well,
but
then I
just,
think just leaving it broader like that is, unless you've got language that really nails it down, but you're gonna have to say both. You're gonna have to say shared area either inside the building or exterior, and garage areas either attached or detached may be allowed and don't count towards the
I don't
residential.
think we need to say that. I mean, that would be my intent anyway,
to say what he said.
yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
say what you
I
said.
said shared or common areas,
Yeah,
and I guess you could, either inside the residential structure
what did we
or,
just say, either within the
You could say inside the principal structure, because that's what we're talking about.
inside the principal structure.
or,
Hold on, inside the principal structure. Yeah, or
Or a
or in a
separate
separate
garage.
building, or in a
Yes,
separate building.
separate building.
what is
In a
it?
separate building.
In a separate building.
Or how
Could be,
about
I
an
don't know why, I
accessory?
mean, you could
It
have
could be a
a,
porch also, or something like that.
could be a porch, it could be a rec room, it
Yes,
could
so-
be,
so-
it could
so
be a
what's the
gazebo, it could be almost
Accessory
anything
I'm sorry.
that's a shared common area.
Okay, but I'm looking for the wording, I know what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Or,
So
or-
shared or common areas,
Either
either
within the
inside the
building.
principal structure
Or
An accessory structure.
or in an accessory,
a separate building or something.
an accessory structure.
Could be gazebo.
I'm concerned about
Yeah.
what might happen where the gazebo then turns into a larger space. A common kitchen, a common this, a common,
But it's gonna be limited by the gross footage anyway. All that is gonna be counted towards gross footage, it's not counting towards the residential square footage. So that was the idea, was if, to allow flexibility in design, that you wouldn't say 1,200 square feet, and then somebody would say, well, and now we're gonna have a rec area and a library and a kitchen and a gazebo and something else. Does that count? And the answer is, no, it doesn't count to the residential square footage units, but it does count to the gross square foot area. So all that does is you can have all those accessories, but it's just gonna reduce the number of units you're allowed.
Or there'll be
I'm
some-
okay with what you talked about, as long as it's captured in the maximum gross floor area for the
That was-
footprint of 12,000.
I would just say that it is included in the gross.
Exactly,
yes.
I mean, I guess I could sort of,
And that's what, I mean, you've talked about that a couple
Right,
of
well,
times.
I don't think this is gonna adequately cover that, because of the floor area and building footprint is specific for the,
The principal structure.
The principal structure. The lot coverage is going to be, the planning board can establish that during site plan review. So the planning board can look at it and say, you know, this gazebo is fine, this recreation hall, way too big. So the board would have the authority to look at that during site plan review and say, no, this is just far too much lot coverage. Now, if you wanna set a lot coverage number, that's up to you also.
I thought it was all included.
No, you have a principal structure that's no more than 12,000 square feet. Any common space that you're using in that structure is going to take away from your residential
Okay.
space.
So
If
if
you are
it's
doing
attached
accessory
unit.
structures, that currently, as this is written, it would be up to the planning board to make the decision whether it was appropriate or not.
And the accessory structures would be in addition to the 12,000.
Yes.
All right, so how do people wanna approach that?
Well, again, a lot of it depends on the lot, you know.
Yeah, David's right.
If you've
Lot
got a big
coverage.
lot and you really wanna do some accessory structure, I don't know.
Yeah, so I think you're right, we should do a lot coverage. That
Okay,
seems the logical way to do it.
and how would you word it?
What's our lot coverage max in the district now?
I think it's six,
So we have maximum lot coverage of 12% in Lyme Common right now.
12%.
Yep.
Maybe it goes as easy as in D, where we say common areas and garage space may be allowed and shall be not counted as residential unit square footage in the primary structure, common areas in the primary structure, just leave it at that.
And then if somebody wants to propose other things,
Let
then
it-
it just
let-
really depends on the site.
Exactly.
does that sound
I
right?
think that makes sense.
So for site plan review,
So are we
Well-
still, are we having a upper limit on lot coverage? Or is that one of those things that's left to the planning board to decide?
No,
I think that should still be.
it stays.
Okay,
So in,
12% stays.
in number D,
Wait, what, David, what?
dimensional control, it says lot coverage would be established by the planning board through site
Right.
plan
So
review.
it's not 12%.
It's
So
not,
it's not-
it's not
not
limited to
eligible.
12%.
But we would have to have a good reason why we
Right.
would deviate from the
Yeah.
12, which is what's within the character of the
It-
neighborhood,
it-
et cetera.
Yeah, we can't be reckless.
Right.
I just want, so we're at about the 45-minute,
we gotta keep going,
I'd like to give,
we've gotta finish what we got to do here.
okay, so what are the thoughts? I'd like to consider a very short shift where people can have very short statement.
Before, at least John, before we do that, can we at least get resolution on what we were just now?
Okay,
At least get that.
sure, okay.
So we just have to decide whether we wanna leave it with site plan review.
No, well, so in D, in D, where it says common areas and garage space may be allowed and shall not be counted as
D,
resident.
wait a minute.
Well, in the
You
original,
snuck in an
original.
extra one on
Okay.
this somewhere.
whatever,
Yeah,
you've got,
so which one is it?
I think you put in the 10 units and 12,000 must have been a new D,
Okay,
which we don't have.
okay,
right, so the problem is you're working off a different draft than
right,
the
that
rest
is a
of us.
problem.
So we're doing the best we can.
Okay. I'll go to this one.
So in one of the alphabets,
Yeah,
you name it.
so the common, the shared and common, yeah, okay, I got it.
Okay.
So what do you wanna say there?
Basically, you reference it with respect to the primary structure.
Right, right, so how do you say it?
Shall not be counted as residential square footage within the within the primary structure.
The primary structure. Shall not be counted as residential unit square footage within the primary structure. Boom.
think we used the word principal before.
Principal,
so let's
primary,
just-
principal.
I know, but it's nice
I'll,
to.
I'll write that down,
to be
principal.
I think, I don't know what the ordinance uses, so I wanna be sure we use the same, so we're not.
Which word do you like to have, David?
If you give me just a second, I will tell you exactly which word I think. Principal.
Yeah, I see principal.
Thank you. And then accessory structures. Then it'll become site plan review
Principal
based on.
PAL or principal POV?
Yeah.
That's how I wrote it, I wrote it.
441.
All right, so, let me see what you got. All right, so we have common areas and garage space may be allowed and shall not be counted as residential units, square footage within the principal structure. And what are we saying about the garages and other outbuildings?
The accessory, they'll be under site plan review.
Right. Are we saying that specifically anywhere?
Yes.
Where?
No, it's.
The whole thing is being reviewed under site plan review.
So those would be two, so it doesn't have to be,
As part of the senior housing project.
so that doesn't have to be addressed separately.
Not that it has to come in for site plan, no.
Okay.
It's part of, I've already said that.
So, maybe, but do you say detached or accessory structures will be considered under site plan review or something like that?
No, the whole thing, that's part of, those uses are accessory to that principal use, and so that gets automatically reviewed.
Okay,
The question is do we wanna limit it in any way, and the answer is yes, we're gonna do that when we consider lot coverage, building footprint, and those other things that the planning board will look at during site plan review, depending on what the site
No,
is.
you're right, because it starts off saying that the development will meet these requirements for site plan
Yes.
review, as well as these
Right.
criteria. boom,
Right.
boom,
So
boom.
we don't need to specify.
Right.
Okay, then, on the old one now, we're on dimensional controls, I made I think a combination. Well, I'll just do the old one. No, I won't. Okay, dimensional controls such as lot coverage, building footprint, and property and road setbacks and gross floor area shall be established by the planning board through site plan review based on the character of the land and neighborhood. This article, I mean, I don't know, is that necessary? Obviously, it's this
No.
article. Do we need that?
No.
Well, it said before the objectives of the article.
All right, do we wanna say that? I don't think we need that. It's inherent. Adequacy of the site to support domestic water supply, water for fire suppression, and on-site wastewater disposal, safety of access, vehicle and pedestrian, and other characteristics of the site relating to its future use and enjoyment. However, the planning board may not approve a project with either here I have either a gross floor area or a building footprint greater than 12,000 square feet. If we just say a building, I mean,
What are you trying to
no,
do?
if we just say a gross floor area of 12,000 square feet, we don't have to bother with a building footprint, do we?
No, you
All right. So, yeah, so the final part would be a project with either a gross, not either.
no, you only have one of
Yeah.
those.
May not approve a
No.
project with a gross floor area greater than 12,000 square feet. Boom?
Yep.
Okay. A minimum, next one, a minimum of 1.5 off-street on-site parking spaces for senior housing dwelling unit must be provided. Parking may not be located in the front setback. You wanted to say, at least one, but, we had, one of our meetings, you made the point that because of pressures with parking in the common area, that we really needed to supply 1.5. Okay?
You might
Also,
wanna,
you tend to have a peak parking problem in some of these places where you
Yeah.
get a lot of
People come.
visitation
If
on
you
the
get visit-
weekends or
exactly.
whatever, and you end up down the street.
you might wanna address, multi-use then, because this deals with just the, dwelling unit, but then you don't have, if you have business uses, you wanna
It may demand more.
Right. Would that be site plan review?
Well, you would do it through site
It's
plan.
site plan review.
Well, maybe say for the residential parking spaces, 1.5 per dwelling shall be provided. And then for the,
Or for the senior housing portion,
right,
a minimum of blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then you might wanna say parking for business uses or mixed uses will be considered under site plan review.
exactly.
Right, there are guidelines in the site
Yeah,
plan.
Dave, what is it now, David, for commercial, for business?
There's a table in the site plan review.
Right, so why don't we just
That's it.
add a line in the table and, say, for the whole development, you go to this table and get guidance for how many spaces you need.
Does the table include residential?
We need to amend this table to say for senior housing.
I see.
So,
At the very end of the
yeah.
document, has it?
That's one way to do it.
I think that's much cleaner than putting parking
Mhm.
requirements in
That one, yeah,
here.
right there.
Okay.
Okay, so we wanna take that out, and we're gonna address it.
I think we have a general statement that, parking for both the residential and non-residential
Shall
components
follow,
shall follow,
boom.
yeah, on.
And then-
yeah,
Okay,
say,
so give me the wording.
Parking, off-site parking shall be provided,
Should be on site.
Shall be provided on site.
shall be provided on-site,
As per,
following the standards contained in appendix A of the site plan,
Hold on, following the standards.
contained in appendix A. The site plan review regulations. And, we don't have, we have multi-dwelling, which has parking based on how many, bedrooms there are.
Outhouses.
So we wouldn't change it. It seems like an efficiency unit has one and two bedroom has 1.5, and a free plus has 2. So that
say,
seems fine.
say that one more
Okay,
time slowly.
efficiency unit has requirement for 1 space. 1 2-bedroom units have 1.5 spaces. 3+ bedroom unit has 2 spaces.
What's efficiency?
Efficiency is like you live in all one room,
Studio apartment.
your bathrooms separate, but your living area and bedroom, kitchen are all one room.
Remarkably, we were consistent with both.
Right. Yeah, right.
All right, so that,
But I think that is parking.
So are we okay with the 1 to 2 bedrooms, 1.5 parking spaces? That seems like
Yeah,
it covers
that's
what
what
we
we
were.
were-
That's what we were
in the
saying
same
anyway.
ballpark, yeah, so we're
Okay.
good.
So you just have to refer to the parking there.
okay. Any existing building or structure abutting or directly across from the Lyme Common or Little Lyme Common may be developed as senior housing solely through conversion. The point of this was so that nobody's gonna come in, tear down these beautiful buildings, these old buildings, and put up who knows what. So we're limiting anything right around the common to conversions only.
Can I play devil's advocate for a
Please.
minute?
Okay,
Okay, so, a lot of those buildings might not be structurally sound to accommodate, maybe there's gonna be an elevator or these new units, and so what if it were to look exactly alike? I mean, I just think about when the country store burned down
yeah.
and how it, got rebuilt looking pretty great. So what if it looks exactly alike? I mean, I know that it's
Oh,
not
yeah,
historic.
no,
but-
that'd be fine, I mean, you mean if it was in such bad shape that,
Well,
it-
structurally,
it's structurally in such bad shape, yeah.
I know, I'm sorry, I just wanted to play devil's advocate, but,
I'd rather be cautious about it, and if it ends up being a problem, then I'll make adjustments. I hate to see,
I know, I don't wanna see that, that's why we have the conversion and all that, but if it were to be, because the existing structure really can't be fixed, that,
Just a quick, question.
okay, my house should have been a tear down, right? So I don't want to set these people up who are trying to do something good, you know.
So how do
Throwing
we?
good money away because you've got a structurally deficient, or, you know, it's just not gonna work, maybe the ceilings are too low, or, you know, or the foundation isn't good enough to put the third floor on that you might want.
I get it.
So
And-
how do we do
Well,
that
I-
without exposing all the
Although
other buildings that aren't like that?
Well, I think it'd be interesting to get people to tell us what they think, because I think it's very controversial, but I just wanted to put that out there because,
Okay.
you know, it's tough, and that is very limiting.
So what, let's take at least a 5-minute. Is it okay if we take a 5-minute break for at least the people who have been sitting here so patiently?
Yeah.
We've covered most of the main.
Well,
We're just about-
there's
Yeah.
plenty to go, actually. Or there's a
For the
significant.
purpose of the audience, I think we've covered
Yeah.
a lot of the
So-
main points
so-
that we've discussed, so maybe if there
All
are any
right, so we're
questions.
gonna take at least 5 minutes. What I'd ask you to do, I mean, there are a lot of people, is to be as succinct as possible, because we still have a lot of work to do. So, here's your moment in the sun.
Okay, and did you wanna just describe the process? That this, we're just drafting a possible amendment.
Why don't you
Okay,
just,
we're just working on an amendment that needs to go to public hearing, so we really want you all to come to the public hearing and give us feedback on that. And then, after the public hearing, it may or may not go on to town meeting, or you have to go. and
yeah,
vote
well,
for it.
to your point, this, I mean, really, this is a working session where we're trying to get to the end game. If we get there and town council likes it, and then we decide to send it to the town, they're gonna be, we're gonna provide a time for 2 meetings to go over the final version. We have 2, because if after the first one, people are pointing out things that we really need to address, we can change it. So that's why, you know, say what you have to say, but for tonight, please keep it succinct. So, yes,
I'll make it quick. Around the common, you're talking about a lot of buildings that may be up to 200 years old. And because of that, when you get working on them, all kinds of squirrely things may happen. And so I don't know how you do it, but there should be room in there for wiggle room and special exceptions. Like if somebody, you have 1,200 feet as your maximum, and let's say the way to create these, some of these buildings are pretty weird. Maybe they need 1,600 in one area. And you don't want the whole direction you're going in is fine, and you don't wanna freeze it because of something like that. So somehow, there has to be exceptions that can be accepted without worrying about what it does to everybody else.
right, so.
Oh, anyway, that's.
So, yeah, so what is the downside of,
John, maybe we should just accept the comments and write them down
Yeah,
and
okay.
take them on
Yeah, we
board.
can think about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, but
Yeah,
thank
we
you, thank you, yeah,
Good point.
Average of 1,200 square feet. There's no reason to cap it at 1,200.
okay.
The developer may want to make some 1,600s and some
So you're
500s.
getting these, David?
Yeah.
Okay,
The age limit, 62 for both residents.
one,
So a 62-year-old father or grandfather could have a school child.
no. The only, oh,
What's the-
I'm sorry, no, 62, there's one, what do we have?
One person.
That's a good question.
So the,
What's wrong with that? So that the older person has a younger spouse and.
Yeah, I mean, the 62-year-old could have a
yeah, but
40-year-old spouse.
what we're trying to do is create senior housing.
Yes, we are.
Without hitting the taxpayer. So we want to build the tax base, but no children, so say it. 62 is fine, or you could say, you could say any age, but no, any age over, what, 18 or 19?
Yeah, well, we kinda have that in there
For the caregiver.
for the care.
Yeah, but that's.
Okay, all right.
But we don't, yeah,
I
right,
think
we
the
don't
idea- the idea-
specifically preclude school children.
Right,
So, the idea, I think, is just for Dave to take it down, it's just,
Okay.
these are just stuff for us to be thinking
Right.
about.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good point.
I'm thinking if you're going to have an aide or a caretaker for one or two of the people, you might need an extra bedroom for the caretaker. Or
yeah,
some
well,
sort of a small room for the caretaker to stay there.
there are, looking at Quail Hollow, they had 2 bedrooms. And those are 1,082 square feet. So 1,200 should do it, but, I mean, that's my response.
Okay.
Yeah,
Michael Deanna, I live on Baker Hill Road.
Yeah.
I just, in the assumptions that you laid out, well, 62-year-old, 1,200 square feet of, being in a downtown area, is there any evidence that this is any kind of best practice in terms of other towns the
Yeah.
size of Lyme?
yeah, I can refer to that, actually. If you just give me a second. Yeah, so, actually, in a lot of towns, I only wrote down one, because in the process of going through this, I looked at other towns' senior housing provisions, so,
Successful senior housing, projects
I
in
mean,
other
I
towns.
haven't, I went to their ordinances,
Okay.
I don't know the specifics, but the review of any site proposed for elderly housing shall recognize the desirability of locating such developments as close as possible to those areas of the community where support services for the elderly are most available. Those services include shopping, food stores, restaurants, major roadways, medical facilities, supplies, places of worship, library, public transport, and walkability. The Lyme Common checks a lot of those boxes. And I mean, beyond that, it just, in many ways, at least to me, seems like common
Now,
sense.
it seems that way, but is Quail Hollow, is it located?
No, Quail Hollow is a totally
Okay.
The only
I'm sure
thing,
there's some
the
other-
only reference in terms of Quail Hollow was we're trying to get a sense of what size units made,
Also, other towns have different situations, they have public transportation or other types of dispersed development, whereas Lyme's Lyme, and there may be other small towns like ours that are that way, but West Leb would be different, because West Leb is much more spread out, so you wouldn't necessarily limit it to just a town center, because there's so many other things there. So you will see variation, but I think based on what you saw, the conclusion of the board was, let's start with where the concentration is, because we don't have the public transportation.
Yeah, I think that's, again, that's something to keep in mind, that David brought up earlier, is this is where we're starting. It seems like a prudent way to go about it, and we'll see.
It
Yeah.
might,
Yeah,
I think that's a bogus limitation,
okay,
because I can pick out 10 people who would love to live in 13 Dartmouth College Highway and grow old there if it was arranged in a fashion that was so appropriate.
uh-huh,
I mean, there's nothing wrong. They have rides, they live on a main road, they got pool resources, they can get to the doctor across the street for crying out loud.
okay, so maybe we'll get to that, but this is where we're starting.
Well, there's nothing that precludes senior-like housing elsewhere in the town. It's just for the
Well-
purposes of this article,
Yeah.
we're creating a process where we're defining it for here. And if there's other areas where seniors wanna live, there's nothing stopping that.
Yeah, that is not a senior housing, even
It
though it
wouldn't- wouldn't fall
tends
under
to
this
be
definition.
predominantly senior, it's not a senior housing development. So I think we need to get back to work. There's one
I
more.
just wanted to mention, just as an example, that if my husband and I were interested in a unit like that, the most likely person that ultimately might choose to move in with us would be our daughter, who's a single mom and they have a 10-year-old
Yeah.
grandson. So that would not be possible. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
mention that.
Yeah, I think
that
that's
we're an
a
example
fair thing to say.
of prospective residents, but then that would not be an arrangement that would work for
for us.
Not
So-
under this provision.
So,
I'm
I just
sorry,
wanted to
I mean, I
check.
genuinely am, I wish we could help everybody in that sense. This is where we're starting. Okay, yeah.
If we have additional comments that might aid your process, who would we send them to?
This gentleman
You can send them right to me and I will get them back out to the board.
be much appreciated. Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you, and let's get back to work. Oh, I'm sorry, no. I didn't realize it was him, no. Yeah,
I
no.
think you wanna be real careful about, I think you wanna stay with conversions on the older buildings. Because I think you go to Hanover, they tear houses down all the time, it shouldn't be torn down.
That was the point, yeah.
And when you really get down to the number of houses that are deficient, I think the planning board either can find a way to deal with it at the time, if they really have to go in the dumpster. Anyway, and I also think you wanna stay with the 1,200 feet, because pretty soon you get to, the more well-to-do will start having these people,
Well,
rather
that's,
than
I
the
mean, one of
average
the
person.
things is we're trying to,
Make housing for the average person,
as best we can.
yes.
But you're gonna have to speak to the gentleman next to you about that.
Yeah.
All right,
Good feedback.
yeah, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Very helpful.
All right, let's get back to wherever we would get back to where we once belonged. On the old one or the new one? Okay, so,
Thank you very much for your service. A lot of hard work.
thank you.
And if it doesn't work this time, it can work next year.
Well, we'd really like to get it done.
We would like to
Yeah.
get something workable.
Sooner the better, none of us are getting younger. Okay, so the last part of that was any existing building or structure abutting or directly across, so I would leave that. The next one, all senior housing must comply with all associated HUD and ADA requirements. My question about that, I mean, that's something we're just gonna turn over to the town council, because I don't know.
No, we need to get a building inspector type of person to come and measure heights of counters.
No, but I mean,
That's,
but we have to put something in here.
That's,
right, but that's a standard, that's a building code standard.
putting in building code standards, we do not have a building inspector here in town that is paid to do so.
So how do we address
So
these issues?
we can't have like some local carpenter go in there and start whacking at it. We need to have a plan that is gonna show that everything in there, you know, you can get a wheelchair into the bathroom. you
So
get
how do we
bars.
word it?
So we have,
Well, I'm just saying, this is something that implies, is that it's gonna be, you know, we need a full set of building plans to make sure they're complying with this, and then we need somebody to go out and inspect.
Maybe you ask them to provide the board with, a compliance certificate by an independent party or something like that.
Well, no one's gonna, at the time when they come in for their site plan, no one's gonna have a full set of construction drawings for their units. So that would be a condition of approval, that they would not start constructing until that was submitted to the town sends it out for review by somebody who's qualified to make sure that they meet all the standards, and then somebody has to come and inspect it after it's built.
Yeah,
Well, but it's,
Ben and I agree 100%.
so,
what's the requirement for the meeting with HUD and ADA?
they're like Twin Pines, they're building the new place down in Hanover, and they've gotta follow all the HUD standards.
so is this
Why not?
language,
I mean,
is
what if
this
somebody
language?
doesn't wanna follow?
Well, then they don't have a senior unit anymore.
Hold
That's what
on.
I'm asking. So in other words, if it's qualified as a senior unit, it has to,
We're saying it has to meet those standards.
we're saying that, but
Yes.
does anybody else say that? I mean, is this
Well,
the
to get federal
national-
money, the Twin Pines needs.
Yeah, but
to-
there's no
I'm just
federal
saying-
money
There's no
involved.
federal money. I'm just saying, if somebody
We're
wanted
just
to know.
saying-
if
I
I
was
wanted to
saying-
know-
Okay, I'd just like to ask a question, okay? Are you saying that this is adequate, this language?
I don't know if it's adequate or not, because I'm not sure what you want. If you want to have that built that way,
Okay,
Yeah, that's
Yes.
my question. Do we or don't we? I mean, what's the, why? I mean,
why wouldn't you want to have things so that if you're in a wheelchair, that the counter's not too high.
Exactly.
Well, but that's,
Or that you
whoever's
can-
building it, they're building it for seniors, and if they don't do it, they're.
But they
gonna sell
could,
it.
they could,
That's up to them, I mean,
You
it's
know,
not.
No,
we
no,
don't
no,
have to
There's a
do it.
great deal of variety about, you know, mobility and physical, you know, how.
somebody could say that this is for seniors and it's not.
Right.
Well, then they won't sell it, I mean, that.
No,
No,
no, no,
no,
no,
But
no.
Tim, we're defining what the town wants to do to meet an objective.
Right.
And one of the objectives is we want seniors in homes that meet applicable ADA and HUD. I mean, we could just say, oh, we don't really care, just once you get your approval, build it any way you want, let the market take care
Yeah,
of
I'm
it.
just saying that a competent developer, somebody's gonna do this, he's gonna,
No, but you
Do that
can't,
anyway.
a competent one would, but not an incompetent one, and there are
Right,
some.
exactly. At least you're saying it needs to be on there, and if it doesn't meet it, or somebody comes in and says, hey, this person built it, doesn't meet any of these standards,
Right.
then we say, guess what? It's not senior housing. It does not,
yeah, okay, well, that's fine.
But
That's
then
what
you
we
have
wanna do.
a,
I'm just gonna-
instead of, you know, that's something that has been built, see, now it's not senior housing,
Yeah, no,
and then,
you have to upgrade it in order for it to be,
we need to address
Inhabited
this,
as
we
you
need,
know,
we
it
need,
needs, I mean, to do this correctly, if you wanna keep this language, then, it's going to, you know, the only way I can see the town being able to do this is that they will have to submit full plans for the units that show, you know, all, everything. And then those plans will have to be submitted to somebody who is an expert at this, you know, consultant at their
I don't,
cost.
I mean, it's standard language in every senior housing ordinance I've read.
Okay,
But, you know, I'm not qualified to go in and
No.
do this, and, you know, Mike Kinsley does not have the time, or, you know, he's not
I
paid.
don't think he's qualified either.
He's qualified.
Is he the-
So,
Yeah, let's
The
not,
first-
let's keep this focused.
yeah, I think the first question is it the right language for this article?
Well, I'm not sure,
That's why
and that's why I was asking,
before we talk about compliance and how we're gonna be compliant, let's first decide it must stay in or it goes.
we need something. Because senior housing, you just can't be reckless with it.
I mean, I see no reason why not to have it in.
Yeah.
It's an expense, truly.
It's
But it's
an
also-
associated expense with anybody building senior housing.
Yes, I agree.
Well, you could,
No, I agree, I think it ought to be in, because I think you wanna build safe and efficient dwellings for seniors. And so these requirements make sense to me.
So the question is,
So the first question is, do we all agree that language like that should be there? Boom.
yeah,
Okay, can I just say, that means that many doorways around the common are gonna need to be blown out so that they're wide enough to accommodate a walker or a wheelchair. That's the kind of, that could run into some structural issues, so just saying that that's what
so
we need to
what's the alternative? Oh, all right, there's a very rude gentleman over here. This is your last
I
chance.
think you're bringing a lot of heartache on yourself and
That's what we
monitoring.
do.
No, and I think that while it, on the face of it, seems like a great thing to try to require, but at the same time, senior housing does not necessarily mean that you have to have seniors in wheelchairs. There may be a point where this isn't suitable housing for them and they need to make a different choice. A builder can certainly build places that are handicap accessible, but he at least has some choice. I mean, somebody mentions countertop heights. So you're gonna build all these things for somebody in a wheelchair, what about everybody that's not? And I think that, you know, there's a ton of limitations to living in a fully handicapped house for the rest of the world.
And expense,
Yeah, well, the expense goes to the guy who's building it, but
and the
we're,
affordability.
Yeah, that's true.
almost, and we've sort of talked about this before, a lot of the houses that I've been involved with, and we're retrofitting some, that, as we go through them, are set up so that they have so-called accessible showers and all that stuff. But you guys are gonna have to monitor this, and I think you're dragging yourself through an awful.
So how do we
lot.
guard against the builder who's not gonna be responsible?
He's not gonna be able to rent his stuff to somebody that's in a wheelchair.
That's exactly what I was
But
saying.
then what happens?
Nothing, he rents to 62 and older, and if they're having ambulatory issues, then they might not wanna rent there.
Right.
but you're trying to solve a problem that,
And they gotta move. if they do.
Okay, first of all, I wanna apologize to Tim. It was my fault.
Well, I don't know why we're doing this then. I mean, if we're doing this for only able-bodied people, you know, they can rent anywhere.
No, we're not. It's just- I think a developer would probably have some units that meet it and some that don't, and allow for people to say, I don't need to pay the expense to live in one that's wheelchair accessible if I'm not in a wheelchair. So, you're right, maybe the market does
Yeah, I think it all works out.
does take care of it, and wouldn't it be sad if you had 10 units and none of them were wheelchair accessible? But I don't know as we can, if we require it, that they're all wheelchair accessible, then we
But-
may squeeze out a lot of people
But aren't
who
there laws?
never would be able to afford to
Aren't
live
there
there.
laws with multi, just even with
I think it's over
multi-family?
three,
What's that?
3 and over, I think.
Yeah,
Then
so,
require a unit or something like that in normal residential, but I'm not sure, there's something in
so,
there.
so I think what we need to do with this is ask the town council
Yeah,
to weigh in,
Yeah.
I agree.
okay?
I'm trying to.
And thank you for your
I'm-
input.
I'm trying to speed read as fast as I can, but it's not gonna work.
No, that's, forget it.
I was on a federal website, so it's.
Okay, so then the next, so we're going to have this one be reviewed, and we're gonna get feedback from town council.
And what is our wish? Our wish is that,
We're compliant.
We wanna be compliant.
okay,
These are units, these are developments, many of them which would be over the limit. What was it, you said 3?
I think there's something about 3 and over, or
But, you
something
know,
like that.
over some limit.
well, do we wanna make sure that there's a percentage?
Well, I think that we need to find out from town council what the law is. We don't know.
But I think, I'm thinking something like when feasible, at least one of the units should be wheelchair accessible. It just is a statement, even though it's sort of a nice to have, as opposed to a requirement,
But there may,
but if there is a
but there may be a
requirement,
requirement.
then.
You know, so there's a lot of stuff with the federal regulations, I'm just reading real quick, you know, it says it's got 5 or more units, must construct 5% dwelling units, at least one of the units has accessibility for people with mobility disability, so it's getting to your point, and that, you know, for federal assistance, you gotta have a certain percentage built to comply.
This is federally.
I know.
Right.
And so it also talks about, accessibility requirements for multifamily housing, privately owned and publicly assisted housing, regardless of whether a rental or sale units must meet the accessibility requirements for Fair Housing Act when they are located in a building of 4 or more units, built for first occupancy after March 13th, 1991.
All right, let's not go down this
So
wormhole.
anyways, so I think your point really is we need to go to legal counsel to see if they can help us, because.
But it sounds like even the feds don't require 100%, that they require a percentage.
A certain
So
percentage.
I would say that what we want in terms of language is from town council is guidance about what is required for these types of developments. Simply put.
That's only for federal money.
No, just in general. There are requirements without federal money.
There are.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one is the owner of any senior housing dwelling unit is responsible for supplying proof of each of the residents' age to the zoning administrator on January 1st of each year and whenever a new resident occupies a senior housing dwelling unit.
He's gonna send out birthday cards too.
And then select board shall be responsible for enforcement.
Oh,
Must take
I guess-
action within 14 days.
well, that's in the, isn't that in the next one?
Well, maybe we're gonna send out birthday
That was
cards.
in the old.
Let's see.
It's a violation.
Okay, I think I used Vicky's language here, because she made an extra one, didn't you? That was upon notification, well, we can, if that's shorter, that's better. So we'll just go with, that's the old one, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll just go with old.
But,
No,
No, but
there needs to be a trigger date about when the 14
Okay,
days
is,
So upon notification by the zoning administrator or any resident of the town, the select board shall be responsible for enforcement and shall take action within 14 days of any violation of this article.
Right, so that neighbor.
the one that you read sounds more specific and
Okay,
implementable than
With
this one, which is very general.
okay.
And then
Anything, anything you'd like to share with the rest of the class, young man? Okay,
So, and it's
so, what?
supplying proof to the zoning administrator?
Upon notification, no, the first one is proof to the zoning administrator, the second one is the zoning administrator going to the town, and go to the select board.
So that's a change from town, because we had
Warning
to
resident.
the town.
They can type themselves nasty.
Yeah. Okay, so other unresolved issues. One being, duration. There's nothing in here that says that the day after they're built, they couldn't be converted to another use. So,
Somewhere like 20 years.
we had 20 years, I saw some places had 30 years, or it could be perpetuity, but I don't think it should be perpetuity because things could change. Yeah, perpetuity is a long
It
time.
is a long time.
So,
Statement of 30 years.
what do you, you're the most experienced one here, what do you think is a good duration period?
I would say 20 years,
Okay.
just to provide some flexibility. And we could run out of boomer generation.
Well, that's exactly what I'm thinking, we'll all be dead, and,
Well, no, yeah, well, yeah, it
Well,
won't
now
be the
within-
demographics.
I think within 30 years, we might think something 20.
we'll speak for yourself.
That's
So 20 years, and what happens at the end of the 20 years? Because I know that over in Lebanon, there was an issue where the 20, I think it was 20 or 30
Yeah,
years,
everybody got booted out.
and they got booted out.
Yeah,
I think it should be
No,
30
what happened
years.
was Twin Pines ended up buying it, but, what they would need to do would be to come forward with a new zoning use and have that approved.
So basically, the planning board, 20 or 30 years from now, will be vigilant, we're counting on them to be vigilant
Could
about
you
this.
say something like this is good for the, first 20 years and then renewable somehow upon planning board review every 10 years thereafter or something?
Not sure that would really cover the major issue, which would be somebody coming in there who wants to end it.
Right, we're trying to keep the old people getting kicked out.
This could also be.
I was just trying to think of some wording that
You know.
captured that, but
It might not be just one, it could be everybody who lives in the building, or the heirs of all the people who did
So-
live there, all wanna live there themselves, and they're all in their 20s, you know, so.
Well, the other scenario too is that the owner goes bankrupt and then it sits there empty. And somebody would have to buy it
the whole.
to say, are we gonna still use it as senior housing because it's not economically viable?
Right, that's
Or,
what- also
or
what
are
I'm
we
getting
gonna
at.
apply to allow it to be used for just plain mental housing or whatever? So you need to have an out
So-
of some type.
Other than the duration period.
I don't know, I'm just
So why don't
raising
we-
the question, because you surely wouldn't wanna have
No,
it go bankrupt and then have it just sit there.
right.
That's not in anybody's interest either.
Yeah, so why don't we have David see if our legal folks we can task them with some wording that captures our thoughts.
Well, what about
Well, I'm just saying, Vicky.
Well, so no, why wouldn't it, I mean, so why couldn't it go to some other kind of mixed use? Would it mean that, I mean, this is my whole problem with, like, why are we just doing senior housing and not doing this for everybody, but anyway, so why couldn't it just go to another, mixed residential and non-residential use?
Well, it can.
It could, but the question is, what's the process
Yeah,
for
what's
it to
the
do
process?
that? You gotta come back here
What if
and
we
get
say-
it re-site reviewed.
What if we say the duration is 20
New uses.
years, or with planning board approval?
You mean to change?
Following a new site review.
Yeah,
Because you'd have to look at things like parking and,
Yeah.
well, for that use, that'd be okay, but I'll tell you, those
No,
narrow setbacks just aren't gonna cut it
No,
with that
no,
use.
but what use would they be then? They have to be a zoning compliant use.
Well, that's.
So would they have to go, if there's 10 units, would then they have to go back to 6 units, which would be the zoning compliant unit?
That's the question, is that somebody would have to come back and, I'm thinking of I'm thinking of either the market goes away and the owner just wants to convert it, or it just doesn't fly and somebody wants to convert it to some other use, then they would have to come back here and say, here's my proposed set of uses, and then we would have to impose perhaps new conditions on parking, or
So-
we couldn't necessarily move a building setback, but we might.
Why have a time limit? 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 year, 100 years, doesn't matter. All you do is say, once it doesn't comply with senior housing, it goes back to the original.
Well.
But the problem is, if you were given greater flexibility, larger footprint, reduce the setbacks, you're getting a benefit for doing
Sure.
senior
From the town.
housing. And then you're saying that, well, oh gee, I couldn't get it to work,
Right?
so.
After 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't want to have a pizza parlor.
So I'm
But
switching.
then, no, but then it's gotta go back to the original zoning.
But you remove any extra building that you've put on.
Exactly.
No, that's.
I mean, that would be nice,
well,
except that you might have given them, you might have let the setback be a little different.
If it goes back to the original requirements, then it becomes, the onus becomes on them. If they want-
But what if they're bankrupt?
If they're bankrupt, then they get paid 10 cents on the dollar. and
No,
somebody
but in
charges
terms,
them a new
in terms
equity.
of requiring them,
Anyways, for those of you in the audience, I guess you can sort of appreciate sort of what it takes to actually get these written.
Yes.
And the feedback, while slightly welcome, somehow, somehow, you
Was
know.
welcome at some point.
It's hard to imagine every scenario.
Right.
And come up with a remedy that you know is
I
gonna be
think,
airtight.
I think we need to keep it simple as we can, and not try to cover everything. I think we need to keep people committed to the senior housing for an extended period of time.
Good job, but making it fall back to the original zoning does exactly that.
Yeah, but then.
But they'd have to get a special exception or something. If it didn't meet a setback, you're not gonna make them tear a building down necessarily.
Yeah.
You might just say, well, that can't be a noisy use, it's gotta be a quiet use.
No, it was
Because
just
you're
like
you're close to the neighbors.
you had 10 units, and guess what, originally, you only could have had 6. And so,
Then you have to tear out
Yes.
Oh, that's.
no, that's just it though, that is the
disincentive.
disincentive for the change, but it still allows it to happen if someone's
What if
incentivized
somebody
enough.
just walks away from their building?
That's my consideration, is that somebody goes bankrupt, they just walk away, and now you got a building, somebody comes in and says, okay, town, I'll buy this for back taxes, but I'd like to turn it into an office building. And so now you gotta say, well, is an office building gonna be, are the neighbors gonna be okay with that?
Right.
You know, no, it can't be a dance hall, but it could be an office building, because we gave them relaxed setbacks because we thought it was gonna be senior housing. Now, they wanna turn it into
Right.
Hard Rock Cafe, Lyme, New Hampshire.
Crazy enough, it just might.
You never know.
Okay, but let's not go wasting time. What we're saying is, we gotta keep it simple. I think that's what we're saying.
I would just say you gotta go back through,
Any change of use has to go back through site plan review.
exactly.
Okay, so 20 years, and thereafter, okay? Is that all right?
Yeah.
I'd say 30, but that's.
We can say
Well, I-
25, or.
I mean, 20 is so short, it's 20 years goes in a blink of an eye.
Well, they don't have to. They can go longer. We're just saying that after 20 years,
You've been granted this
Right.
increased
you're given a
flexibility.
franchise for 20 years to do it this way,
Okay,
which is.
Yeah, no, I know
which
they
is-
can go longer, but they can get out of it after 20 years.
Right,
I'm just saying that's a
Yeah.
short time.
I could. And maybe
Alright.
maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
If you achieved what you wanted to for 20 years and there's another building
There's
next
as
door.
much probability that somebody would go under in 10 as there is that somebody would be mad that we would be bummed that they're cutting loose after 20. That we'd rather have them go to 30 or 40.
Yeah.
Alright, so what's the language? All senior housing developments shall what?
So remain as senior
Shall
housing for a minimum of 20 years.
remain,
Go ahead, Vicky.
I was gonna say like the, use of a senior housing project shall not change for 20 years.
A minimum.
yeah, I mean, well, we're saying 20 years, because after 20, they can change it.
Right.
And, alright, so what was that?
So-
The use of senior housing? A senior housing,
A senior housing
We call this-
development must remain as senior housing
Must, the use must not
for 20
change.
years. Yeah, the use must not change.
Principal residence as defined by this article shall remain in service.
well, it's not just the principal. They're
You
associated.
can't just say a senior housing
Yeah,
development.
the use of senior housing development shall not change,
For 20 years.
change
In less than 20 years.
for 20, I'll just say 20 years.
Well, what if in year 10, they decide they don't wanna be a senior housing and they wanna go back to a zoning compliant use? They should be allowed to do that,
Well, then,
right?
If
Should
they
they?
wanna sell to
They
somebody.
have to go back to something that was zoning compliant. I mean, it's just like, maybe everybody wants to have a senior housing
Right.
development for 20 years, but say that person wants to sell it and the next person really doesn't wanna do senior housing and instead
If it
wants.
goes back to being compliant, I don't see, if they
Yeah,
wanna go this way, that way.
Yeah, I don't see that
I,
there's a problem,
I think it's,
but they gotta make it compliant and maybe they can't,
they're getting a lot of benefits. I don't see any problem in asking them to commit for 20 years, particularly if somebody 62 moves in there, they're gonna be, conceivably be 82 after
it's
20.
young. That's
Do
like
it
the
fine.
new 30 or something.
Or
Yeah.
17.
Right, so, I mean, that's just not reasonable. We're asking for a commitment.
She was just what ifing.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about real estate investment and,
Well, they're getting something in return.
right, but wanting there to be value in real estate in Lyme and putting like this
It
20-year
may not be
thing.
bank financeable, that'd be the question, is if the bank said, yeah, well, what happens if this doesn't go? Can we convert it back to another use, just like they wanna know if they go bankrupt and we end up owning it, what are we gonna do with it? Are we only gonna be able to run it as senior housing? And I think you're better off saying something like, any conversion from senior housing may only occur by
Any change of use.
applying to the planning board.
Wait, when you say that, you mean any change of use?
Right, conversion from a senior housing use to another use must go to the planning board for site plan review
Within-
in order to be converted to a zoning compliant use.
Within 20
But
years.
the thing is, we don't deal with uses.
Leave the time off.
They gotta go back to the zoning
No, they
board
would
or
go to the
something
zoning
like that,
board.
or first of all, they could just say, oh, yeah, I wanna do like whatever uses are
But,
allowed on the
if-
line comment, and that would be just okay. They could
We're
go-
asking them to, people are gonna be, some people are gonna be living in these places for, it's very conceivable for 20 years. And we're not only asking, for, we don't, not only considering the burden on the builder, but this is so that seniors are guaranteed an
I get that, I would like to find a way to guarantee that, but also I don't wanna have it be that we end up with something that doesn't work.
For the builder.
All right, this is the last time, but go ahead.
I don't disagree with what you're saying about the financing, but I think, and again, I'm supportive of the things, your thoughts. I think you get to this place of micromanaging
Yeah.
what somebody's gonna do. If they can't, if they wanna finance it or pay cash, that's up to the builder.
Right.
And the other thing that I think you wanna think about is one of the things we've talked about before was trying to keep this so it was owned by a single entity. And there were thoughts that, no, this could be sold off in condos, which I think would be a mistake. in the long run. But as you're worried about what's gonna happen to this in 20 years, what's gonna happen if it's all condos?
Right.
And now you're dealing with a whole smattering of people and everybody wants something else. I think, you know. Anyway, that's gonna be a real mess.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think
Well,
there's a
but-
good
but-
possibility there will be condos.
But then Ray's project is
Condos,
condos,
right.
so what, we're gonna disallow that as a senior housing?
Well, if it's over 1,200 feet, it won't fly anyway, under senior housing.
No, it's not, he was doing it at 1,100 feet.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you know.
But even if it's condos, wouldn't it, the 20-year, would it still apply that they have to keep?
Look, I mean, I think one thing we need to realize is no matter, you know, whether we're doing this in the Lyme Common or we're doing it anywhere in town, these issues are gonna come up. And, what I've seen in most of the ordinances, and you should all go look at the different ordinances, is they just keep it pretty simple.
They just say 20 years.
Well, 20, 30 years, and
We have to see the words of how do you say, the property may not be converted to use other than senior housing for a period of 20 years.
Well, that's like a HUD thing, so if HUD's gonna give you, money to do the project, then you've gotta agree to keep it, serving the people
Right.
that it was designed to serve
Well,
for
that's
20 or
John's
30
same
years.
point.
Yeah.
John's
So
making the
that's-
same point.
Yeah,
We're just trying to
that's
figure
right.
out how to say it for the purposes of this.
right.
And I don't think it matters if it's condos or not, because if it's a condo, then it's the same thing. I mean, whoever owns the condo, they couldn't sell it within 2
No,
years.
right, if
For
John,
something
if
other
John
than
wants to
senior
lock it
housing.
in for 20 years, which I don't disagree with, I think that's fine, but, we just gotta figure out how to word it.
Right.
And that's the hard part. Wording is,
Everything.
semantics is everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but knowing what you wanna do is like the first step, which we've taken, I think we agreed to 20 years. And so none of you mentioned a, senior housing development having, non-senior housing mixed in with the senior housing in the same building?
Well, yeah, I can envision that if there's, you know, if it fits on the lot.
Well, it's in the building, yeah, I mean,
Well,
So she's saying having
within the
units that are not senior housing.
right.
Well, that's why we
So-
set the
So Ray's
50% up
project
front.
has two.
well, that's mixed use.
Could be,
Well, this
not
is
senior
mixed use.
residential, why
This
not?
is
Well,
mixed
so then
use.
that's mixed use.
This mixed use
Yeah,
is
but I
senior
think-
housing plus anything else.
I think you could, you know, the way it's worded, because you're allowing for mixed use. It doesn't say that you can't do it for you know.
It can be
is it-
just regular residential, it
Right.
doesn't have to be senior.
Well, that's the way it's written.
Well, I think.
I mean, I think the idea was it was going to be all senior.
Yeah, we're trying to create senior housing.
No, we just said it only needed 50%.
Yeah,
senior.
but, I mean, I think, I'll speak for myself, I was thinking of business use.
Well,
I don't think it really, you know, when you get down to it,
Doesn't
it
matter.
doesn't really matter whether it's a business use or a residential use, it's.
we were talking about it from the perspective of somebody gaming it. And you could game it with residential too. You could say, well, we're gonna do nine non-senior and one senior,
Well,
we're
we're
gonna call it senior.
gonna have a floor.
Well, no, you gotta have at least 50%, and it doesn't matter to me whether it's a pizza parlor or a non-residential apartment. I don't really care, I don't think it matters
If it's
that
gonna
much.
be residential, I think it should be 80-20 then.
All right, so I have some questions for the board. I mean, we're pretty close, but we have a few sticky things left.
Well, I'm generally in agreement with the 20-year goal, if we can figure out a way to word it.
Right, but I just wanna ask a general question of the board, which is, we're 20 to 9, and it's not like, you know, we'll turn into pumpkins at 9, although I'm getting close. I'm really committed to getting this done this year, because
You're not getting any younger.
I think there's an urgency. Are people willing to have another special meeting to polish us off, or to stay here until we all go insane tonight?
I think we all need to look at it, you know, nobody has the text,
Okay,
you know, so.
We do need a
I-
clean draft.
right.
I think we need a clean
So my question is, are you all willing, are you committed to meeting again, because we need everybody.
And I will also tell you that you have another lot line adjustment coming up for your next meeting in December that was submitted.
Can we push that?
Easy to do.
Oh, well, that's okay, because this would be, we need to do this before that meeting.
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying that that is now on your schedule, so you don't have that full meeting.
When's the latest we can have,
We can continue this meeting if we could find a place and or time when we all want to get together,
True.
and then we just
But we need to
continue
be
it.
mindful of our time limit, for getting it to the town and getting it to town council. That's what I'm asking for the date certain, we need to have it.
And having time for a public hearing.
Next Monday night.
Are you sure?
Asking.
Oh,
Or to do it next.
oh, next Monday night, is that within our time frame?
If you continue this
Okay.
meeting tonight, and you vote to continue this meeting,
Okay,
then
so,
I don't have a problem with
so everybody's committed to being here
I
next?
don't know.
It's a
let's see.
second.
Well,
It's a second.
you're crucial,
that.
so.
What's the date?
Not letting-
second.
I think I'm fine. Yeah, before we stop, let's, so review what we need to.
Right.
Yeah, review what
Sure.
we need to still do.
Oh, yeah, well, I have another question, which is whether we need to, and David, this is really a question for you, I think, whether we would need to amend or refer to, I think it's 446, the conversion table of this. Would we need to make special provisions relating to conversions? Because in the conversions table, it's really it's up to 6. So we might need to say that was senior housing, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, Article 13.
Yeah, Article 13 and 446. I'm not sure if 446 is right, but,
If we're requiring conversions, then, yeah, we need to.
you know what I mean?
Well, hold it, but should we even be calling it a conversion? Because we've got a pretty specific meaning, so.
It
before-
seemed to me that you're talking about a brand new,
It's not a real
Right,
conversion
you're
is
not-
one
it's
thing
not a
already,
conversion.
and so we've
Okay.
gotta call it something else.
Okay, so that's another thing to add to the list of things.
Metamorphose.
and I did pick up 441 also is going to need a reference, which is just the principal building and activity on lots.
Right,
There shall be one principal building and one principal activity on the lot unless otherwise approved under lot size
Right.
averaging, and then the same language that's in all
Right.
those other.
just,
I think we can use the definition of conversion is the changing of a use to another use or uses in an existing single building, so that's clean. It's just when we get into the conversion language here. So,
You could add under 446, add another section that just
just
Says-
applies to Article 13.
is approved under
Yeah.
Article.
Right,
well, and I don't think we wanna have those, like, this A wouldn't conform. Rest of it, and A and F seem to be the only. Yeah, A, F, and G, yeah, we'd wanna, have.
all right, well, we don't need to figure this out tonight if we're gonna
Okay.
be, but Vicky, you need to tell us whether you can do.
Yes, I have no other night meetings on December 2nd.
Is it December 2nd?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could, we'll continue this and you'll warn it.
You'll have to vote to continue.
Yeah. I'd like to make a motion to continue this meeting to December 2nd at 7 o'clock.
Second.
Second, all those in favor? Okay, and so you're all committed to showing up. But I'll be taking the night off. Okay, so let's review. We have to deal with 441, we have to deal with 446. We need to finalize the the floor, the percentage floor, and if we're gonna have, well, we do have to have one, because, we have to do that. We have to decide about the duration.
Right, thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. We're gonna hear back between now and then, if you.
I am on vacation for the rest of the, I actually was supposed to be on vacation
Right,
today.
right,
and
first of
came
all,
in.
yeah, we should thank David, because this is, right now, he's supposed to be on vacation, but.
He is on vacation, he's
Yeah,
at this meeting.
yeah, right. But can,
I'm not gonna be able to write this up and get it to town council.
Okay.
Um,
is there a way we can do it, or, well, you can contact town council, so,
Just have to have changes.
no, all I'm concerned about is the HUD thing.
And I'm not sure how useful town council is going to be on that. I have great concerns that he's,
Oh, it's Steve?
yeah.
He left,
Really?
He really left?
I think so.
Really? So we'll get something new?
I don't know.
All right, so, the duration,
And the percentage, right? of-
yeah, the percentage I already mentioned. 441, 446, the percentage, and we'll review the whole thing, because everybody will have the full.
Right.
So, if I type up this, you're not gonna be there, so.
If you type it up and get it to me, I will take a few minutes from home and just repost it to everybody else.
But do we can send it out?
I can access my email from home without
But
any,
you're on vacation.
But
Would it be okay if I just send it to Dina?
I mean, I don't mind
No, I
taking a
appreciate
few
it,
minutes
but
to.
you've already done enough damage for one thing.
Well,
Thank you very much, really. All right, so can we call it a day? We're pretty close. We're gonna meet on Monday and notify Rich.
yeah, I will send out tonight before I leave
Okay.
a reminder.
Okay.
Yeah, just,
And then CC Dina, and then she'll have all the emails, just in case she doesn't.
Yep.
Okay.
yeah, we need a clean draft, because you were working off of one that was
I'm
sort
working
of
off-
different.
I'm walking off wire.
It would be
I
nice to.
can't talk anymore. I'm working off of two, actually three. So, are we done here?
Rich is, he had sent some questions.
Yes, I think we addressed some of them, and I think we should have time to specifically address them next time.
Okay.
We certainly addressed some of them.
I think a lot of what he's asking is, like, it's because, I mean, it's relative to what we already regulate or have in town. That's kind of how we got at 1,200, or,
Yeah, well,
Well,
I think,
you know, or how we
I
got
think
at
we,
10.
I think we
you know?
addressed a lot of that, anything
Yeah.
that we did, and we addressed viability.
Yeah.
So,
He has been here for these discussions.
yeah, no, I know, and we've answered them multiple times,
Right.
quite frankly.
He was using the device to try to get us to be more explicit.
Yeah,
Particularly
which
with
is
the crowd
fine.
that was here, and I think we did cover it
I-
for the purpose of the crowd that was here.
I think we should be challenged and should be able to defend what we're doing, so I don't have a problem.
We will eventually be
Yeah,
so
right.
challenged.
All right, well, thank you for the remaining two people who, you're like the last guys in the stadium when they're coming around to clean up the popcorn.
They're waiting for all the half-empty beer, cans of beer.
Really, you should get medals.
Well, I think, even for me, it's just a learning experience of what it takes to really try to work on
Well,
this
this
board.
is a major,
So,
for Lyme, this is a major thing. And I'd like to thank everybody on the board for your extra work and diligence, really appreciate it.
Okay, so a week from tonight.
enjoy the holiday.
Enjoy not
Enjoy
being
your
here,
vacation, yeah.
How long are you on vacation?
Word for rules and
It's gonna take the whole
regulations
week.
is
but you'll be here on
really
Monday.
I'll be here on
frickin'
Monday.
hard.
What's that?
I said, the wording for rules and regulations and for laws, when you're drafting a law and you're trying to get it passed, or whether you're writing a rule, it is really hard, and most people don't have any idea how hard it is. And one word can totally change the meaning and be fully litigated.
That's right.
A comma can be litigated to the end of the earth. When
That's
somebody
right.
wants, if there's enough money involved.
I never use a comma.
The answer is money. What was the question?
I used to get a lot of red marks for comma splices.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't use commas anymore.
I used to put commas after every word.
I think it was like my sixth grade grammar teacher, English teacher.
The difference between a marriage proposal and a force majeure. Will you marry me? And all of
Mom's
comments.
coming tomorrow.
Really good.
With all the laws.
For how long?
Mom?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, having served in the legislature, that there were times when there was a bill that
So I guess
somebody wanted
I'll
to
take a motion
pass,
to end this
and the